Yu Jung-hyuk's wrinkles deepened as he stared at the symbolic figure shaped like a doll. How are you sending an indirect message without a channel? The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire says that it is possible if the symbolic body is in contact with the incarnation. Uriel's symbolic body was the doll on Yu Jung-hyuk's shoulder. Yu Jung-hyuk gently poked the symbolic figure with a finger. Is it okay to do this? The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire says it will be okay as long as it isn't caught by a dokubi. No, I'm not talking about the dokubi. Uriel initially didn't understand what he was saying. Yu Jung-hyuk pointed to the side of the doll. The doll cocked her head and then covered her mouth with both eyes. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is deeply moved by the heart of the incarnation Yu Jung-hyuk. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire says it is a bit painful. There were weak spots around Uriel's symbolic body. It was because the demon world was taboo for her, an archangel. The demon world was the domain of the demon kings. Uriel was taking an unnatural risk and forced to bear the burnt probability of being exhausted. Uriel moved, clinging to his arms, and Yu Jung-hyuk asked him, "Why are you going so far to look for Kim Dokja?" The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is asking if it isn't the same for you. There seems to be a misunderstanding. In fact, the demon world was originally a place where he would have never come. The difficulty here was incomparable to the other scenarios of the same ranking. It was comforting that this was the 73rd demon realm. There were no demon kings, and the ruler would be a duke at most. This much was worth a try. Above all, he was much stronger than he was at the same point in his previous regressions. I just don't like people impersonating me. It doesn't matter if it's Kim Dokja or not. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is laughing. There are also many usable items in the demon world. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is laughing loudly. Do it one more time and I'll rip apart your body. Yu Jung-hyuk turned his head and gazed at the wide horizon. Perhaps that bastard was somewhere in this desolate world. In this silent world, Yu Jung-hyuk finally started moving. The Sistwitz Industrial Complex. The atmosphere of the Duke's office was much more unusual as Earl Sillock sweated while reporting. Therefore, we plan to control access into and out of the industrial complex while the revolution is ongoing. Sillock's heart sank several times as the face of the Gilabat envoy distorted in front of him. This person might be Gilabat's envoy, but he wasn't the one in charge of the delegation. Explosive Ambrose. He was a marquise of the Gilabat Industrial Complex and the most prominent candidate to be the next Duke of the 73rd Demon Realm. Sillock gasped for breath as he saw the fire glowing in Ambrose's eyes. He might have fled if it hadn't been for Duke Sistwitz standing at the window and looking outside leisurely. That's why I'm asking the Gilabat envoys to stay here for a while. Have you finished speaking? Yep, then I will go. Sillock hurriedly opened the office door and ran away. Meanwhile, Ambrose took a few deep breaths to control his temper. It was an annoying situation, but he couldn't act as usual. It was because the strongest existence in the 73rd Demon world, Sistwitz, was behind him. Duke Sistwitz stared out the window for a while before smiling. That's what happened. What am I supposed to do? I'm sorry, but you can't leave. Please stay in the Sistwitz Industrial Complex for the time being. In the end, Ambrose exploded. Don't you know these words can cause diplomatic issues? You're too sensitive. It is just a protection measure for the envoys of the Alliance. Is it because of the revolutionary? 7 executioners and 2 marquises have died. It's been a long time since this happened. The last phase of the revolutionary scenario would start when all executioners in the complex died. Strictly speaking, Duke Sistwitz was in a crisis right now. Unlike his words, there was no sense of crisis in Duke Sistwitz's expression. Ambrose didn't like this contradiction and complained, "A revolutionary appearing at this time. You must want to save face, Duke Sistwitz." Really, I think it's fun. It's been 30 years since a revolutionary emerged in Sistwitz. Sometimes this event is needed. You were speaking like the constellations. Why not? The story isn't only related to the constellations. Ambrose would have scoffed if a normal incarnation had said this. However, Duke Sistwitz was qualified to say such things. He wasn't comparable to the upper-grade constellations, but Sistwitz was a monster who had ruled the 73rd Demon Realm for 400 years. It is good to have as many stories as possible before beginning the Demon King competition. The more powerful the revolutionary that appeared, the better it is for me. He never even thought about being hit by the revolution. Why are you so confident that you can stop the revolution? Why do you think? Ambrose's eyes sank at the question. Maybe it was an obvious story. Sistwitz had lost 2 marquises in this incident. I hope you won't betray Gillabat. Who said that? I'm telling you this personally. I will also give you a piece of advice. Do you think that Duke Gillabat can become the Demon King? Ambrose was a bit upset by the words. Sistwitz didn't give him time to think. Or do you think Melodon and Birkin can become the Demon King? I can't answer this question. No, you can't answer it. It is because everyone knows who was the strongest of the 4 dukes in the 73rd Demon Realm. Ambrose gulped. This calm declaration could sound so scary. Once again, the oldest duke of the 73rd Demon Realm couldn't be ignored. It won't be easy. Melodon has joined hands with Vedis. He isn't the only one who can borrow the power of the constellations. These words. Duke Sistwitz stared at the sky outside the window instead of answering. The Dokkaebes will come soon. Then, what will happen next? Now the night sky was completely dark. However, soon there would be many stars in the night sky. Then the other Demon Kings would show up as a response to the emergence of the constellations. Marquis Ambrose felt a heart-shaking sensation. Finally, the 73rd Demon Realm would become a battleground for a proper scenario. Is there a channel liaison yet? I put in a request to the Bureau. At this moment, Ambrose realized why Sistwitz didn't look for support. Once the Dokkaebes appeared and the full-fledged scenarios began, the constellations would gather towards the bigger events. Suddenly, some thoughts ran through his head. It wouldn't be bad for there to be a small entertainment before the full-fledged Demon King competition begins. The constellations love slaughter. Is that why you're leaving the revolution alone? Sistwitz stared at the smoke with a strange smile. Ambrose sighed bitterly. You were born evil. Every conflict in this world was a commodity. Now Sistwitz was selling the lives of the many citizens in the industrial complex to seek the attention of the constellations. Thank you for the compliment. Ambrose shook his head like he was tired. If he planned this production, then Duke Sistwitz would surely be preparing for a greater blow. It wasn't difficult to predict what would happen in the industrial complex. I can see movement in the factory. The most powerful story weapon possessed by the Dukes, the factory. Duke Sistwitz nodded. I have already prepared for it, so you will see it sooner or later. Anticipation filled Ambrose's eyes. The most powerful person in the 73rd Demon Realm. It wasn't a common opportunity to see him in action, then. The hashtag BI-905494 channel has been created in the Sistwitz Industrial Complex area. Ambrose heard the message and stood up with amazement. Did you call the Dokkaebes already? Once he saw the expression on Duke Sistwitz's face, Ambrose realized that this wasn't a part of the plan. The door of the office opened and somebody ran in. Duke, I'm sorry, but I've got an urgent report. It was Earl Sillock, who had previously fled from this place. Sistwitz quickly managed his facial expression and replied, Tell me. His report was probably related to the emergence of the new channel. However, unexpected words emerged from the Sillock's mouth. The factory isn't operating hard enough. Duke Sistwitz made an embarrassed expression. What does that mean? Didn't I tell you to replenish it? That it looks like all the citizens who came to work have stolen the story fragments. Ambrose noticed how things were progressing and said, It seems this revolutionary is using his head. Perhaps the Dokkaebis moved first because of him. That is possible. Impossible. The negotiations with the Bureau haven't ended yet. Duke Sistwitz frowned at the unexpected situation and immediately gave instructions. Send the supervisors and the slaves to the horizon. Have them collect more story fragments. I've already sent them. By the way, Duke Sistwitz hadn't realized that the report wasn't over. Earl Sillock's shoulders hunched over like he was afraid of how the Duke would react. I lost contact with the supervisor who went out to collect the story fragments. The horizon of the Sistwitz industrial complex. Jang Hayoung kicked the body of the dead supervisor and said, It seems like the Duke has been preparing for quite a while, ordering a collection of this scale. It was an extra-large collection with thousands of slaves mobilized. The situation was resolved, but it would have been dangerous if it had been a bit later. It was impossible to launch a full-scale war against the factory when my incarnation body wasn't yet intact. Things would have become worse if these story fragments entered the factory. You were good. I glanced at Han Myung-oh beside me. He knew the Duke would move in this way. If Han Myung-oh hadn't been the spy, I wouldn't have guessed the exact timing to put my plan into action. Han Myung-oh was elated by my praise and laughed. Who am I? Aren't I the brain of Minosoft? You could use that as a modifier if you ever become a constellation. I smiled at Han Myung-oh. At first, I didn't like being on the same side as this person. Now, I thought it wasn't a bad choice. Bring the slaves over here. I will start repairing the ones who are still sane first. Now that I had decided to wage war properly, I could feel something different from Eileen and the citizens. I watched them and controlled my heart. The baby Dokkaebe, who looked like cotton candy, sat on my shoulder and cried out, Bah! Her memories hadn't been recovered, but every Dokkaebe had the instincts of a streamer. They filled in the scenarios where there should be a story. A new sub-scenario has arrived. The sub-scenario, Liberate the Slaves, has started. Thank you. I lightly stroked her head and Bu shouted, Dat! It might not be possible for me to enter the main scenario, but I could receive a sub-scenario whenever there was an opportunity. It might be a temporary measure, but if I kept building up sub-scenarios, I would be able to recover enough to face the Duke. Kim Dokja thought, There is nothing urgent. Time is still on my side. I now need to thoroughly prepare to safely pass the Demon World scenario. I sincerely thought this, at least until I heard an unexpected message. A new constellation has entered the hashtag BI-90594 channel.